Hello. Would be beautiful if everyone will sit down again and we will come to the Q&A right now. Formulate your questions, please. Hello.
Das geht besser. Machst doch die Batterie schon wieder. Ein Vogel. So, das ist Max und dann ist nochmal Jo. Ja, hätte das. Willst du das moderieren? Wir haben jetzt noch ein Mikrofon dran hier.
Ja.
Das geht auch. Gut. Willst du auch Mikrofon rumreißen? Ja, wie viel? Zwei rumreißen. Wo ist das andere?
Ah, okay. Cool. All right, we start the Q&A right now. Jones? Hello. Okay. Yeah, we start with Q&A right now, and yeah, if you have some questions formulated, please make your questions short and precise, if it's possible. We also have a webcast, as you know. We are streaming worldwide. We have already 1,000 people all over the world watching it. And of course we have some questions from that. So, yeah. So, who has the first question? All right.
Can we start?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, what would you say to somebody that would say, economies of scale, and this is powerful, this is an efficient, this is a driving motor of productivity in this world, to have the same factory producing cars and cars and chairs doesn't work out. You need these economies of scale. What would you say?
Even mass production in socialist economies are still of scale. They have enormously large factories mass producing things at will. All I'm saying is that economies of scale due to ephemeralization of the fact that the means of production, machines like 3D printing, are getting more advanced, smaller and smaller, to the effect where you might in the future have a very large printer that can produce maybe all the clothes that you would need in your home, but produce a lot of the general home goods. The tendency is everything's getting smaller and customizable very easily without the need for mass production. So without the overrun problem of mass production, you could very easily have a society where everything's on demand, everything. Where if you want to produce mass production, you can. If you want to produce one of something, customize a vehicle for your purposes, the technology is there to facilitate that without the necessity. It doesn't mean that there's less made, it doesn't mean demand isn't being met. It just means there isn't the necessity for these huge fixed automation machines to run the same processes over and over again. Does that make sense? Okay. Thank you.
As I have many questions, I'll just take one of them. I'm an engineer, and as an engineer, I know that in order to have a stable system, you need to have a negative feedback, something which counteracts and stabilizes the system. So this negative feedback would reinforce. antisocial behavior and then would punish somehow antisocial behavior. What is the negative feedback of the system you propose?
Well, if we're talking about material production, the negative feedback is, well, I would say the negative issues that are possible or conducive to any given production are immediately addressed in that equation I called the design efficiency equation, which means that you have a rule set, which the entire point of this rule set is to bypass as many possible foreshadowable problems you will ever have. Now, on a larger level, I'll also point out that the global resource management idea, where you have these things that are monitoring scarcity, for example, it's all in real time. So it's both positive and negative feedback, if you will, generally speaking. So the point is to anticipate. It's, as Mr. Fuller would say, it's anticipatory design. And I think all of that stuff is equated. And clearly you're monitoring the possible negative effects of everything, to be more specific. That just goes with the nature of any kind of a sustainable approach. And it would be built right into the program. And again, initially started right in that initial design efficiency algorithm that I spoke of, which makes sure at the very front, at the very beginning, that nothing is done that isn't meeting sustainability standards. So the punishment, if you will, is the fact that if you submit something that isn't sustainable and you don't conform to the system, you can't do it. It's not going to let you do it because it doesn't meet protocols of sustainability or efficiency. I hope that answered your question.
Okay. Carl Gabriel from TZM Belgium asked, do you envision a sort of structure within TZM to review TZM defined and give constructive feedback in a structured manner, in this way improving, evolving TZM defined?
As far as the textbook, sure. There has to be some starting point. There will be numerous editions of this text. We need something in motion now. This movement has been without a firm text for a couple of years now. It's taken a long time to put it together. The movement has been compiled and amalgamated and filtered through the core TZM lecture team, if you will, which is a very small group at this point, which I hope will get larger. Having an open source communicative platform for this type of material, it's very helpful, but it can also create enormous time length of actual finishing. So let's get this out first, and then all that stuff will be reviewable. A wiki could be set up to post and review, and people can give feedback. I'd love to see that. But something has to be set in motion to set the standard first. So let's get this out first, and then there will be larger order review. And that's the whole point. And everything that's in this text is based on feedback that's been happening throughout the years. It's not just novel stuff that's been put together without feedback.
All right, I have a question not exactly related to the lecture, but I would like you to give your opinion on the differences and similarities between the Zeitgeist movement and anarchism as a movement, as an ideology.
You mean, well, there's a number of different schools of anarchism. You mean communist anarchist? You mean capitalist anarchist? You mean anarchist?
The anarchist, let's say.
I have no idea what the anarchist actually is. I want to know what you're saying. Please describe to me what you're talking about, so I know.
How many of these core, let's say, ideologies of anarchism, which are connected with basically, I don't know how to explain it right now because it would take too much time. Basically, anarchism is in this core meaning of rule, no rule, and the society without any form of oppression or rule or hierarchical structure.
I can relate to that. I think in the context of a capitalist anarchist, which I'm familiar with, they look at any act of what they call coercion, so anybody imposing their will on somebody else as morally unjustifiable, and they present lots of arguments for that. I think all those things that are trying to stop oppression of society are all well and good, but if you look at the framework of the synergy of our relationship to each other on this planet in the environment that we're in, the pressures that are created, you cannot reduce coercion to just behavioral action. It's actually a process. You know, when someone mugs you on the street and takes your money, that's an act of coercion, obviously. But yet, you don't know what happened to that person in their life to deprive them to such a degree where they are forced to do that. That might not have been what they wanted to do at all. There was a story that happened in New York that a mugger went in and was right down the street from me, and he stole some food, actually just robbed the cashier. And a year later, he went back and paid the cashier back and apologized and explained why he did what he had to do because of pressures in his family. So a lot of that stuff flies out the window with me when we think about non-coercion as a universal principle, because it only really thinks about behavioral or policy stuff, taxation or tariffs, if you want to talk about economic coercion. I think it all falls flat. I would say this proportion is what is caused by the coercive negativity caused by human behavior alone, if you will, if there's even such a thing, and this is the coercion is a consequence of our inefficient system. And not to mention, as a final point, nature is inherently coercive. We can't just do anything we want. I can't run up this wall and run on the ceiling. I just can't do that. So there are laws that restrict our behavior, hence the sustainability and efficiency laws. So rather than think about people imposing upon you, which I think is where anarchism kind of is rooted, let's remember that their behavior is a consequence of influence, and also remember that we have to be sustainable and efficient. Therefore, we have to follow some set of rules. Thank you.
All right. Does this work? Can anyone hear me? We have another. Is this working? Okay.
Okay. In a system based on access, it would be possible that someone takes very much more than he needs. So do you think there would be the necessity to define a maximum of that someone takes, or how could that be possible?
I think in the case of severe, there's no incentive to do it, first of all, which I point out, because that's a common question. Why would someone go into a facility and take 40 televisions? What are they going to do? They can't resell them. Maybe they have an art piece. And that can be provided for in a certain sense. I think the equation would be, if everyone was to take the same amount, and there would be some type of buffer, and it would say, this process you can take X amount, but if you took more, it would mean that everyone else would have to take, if everyone else took the same amount, then it would be an overrun. So it's a sustainability equation, a sustainability of balance based on population. Does that make sense? A very crude equation that says, if not everyone can have the same number of what you're having, then you're an overrun and you're out of sustainable line. Now, I think that would be a limited problem because there's no reason to hoard things. I think the only example would be, very extreme examples where someone needs something for a very abstract concept. And there could be other processes of engagement when it comes to industry as far as how that could be obtained. If someone wanted to maintain and get that many, they wouldn't go to a library to do it. They would order in advance and go through the sustainability protocols put forward through the machine, the mechanism, the process that I talked about. It would be a separate layer of engagement. It wouldn't just be taking a bunch of stuff from one facility. So I don't know why the reward would be for that. I don't think the incentive would exist for that. And again, you could create alerts, if you will, in the event someone did that. And again, the whole foundation here when it comes to this idea of luxury, this idea of what it means to be in line with sustainability isn't just a natural equation, it's a resource distribution equation for the whole world. If a given resource that's very dire comes into play, we can either fight for it, just like we do today, or we can understand it. And that means that others would have to have less of that resource. That way we maintain social stability. If you have an educational system that's aware of that, say, well, we're running out of this, we don't have substitutions, we have to do something very different in the process. Then everyone would understand, if they're educated, to understand that if they didn't do that, social instability would arise. It's a hard point to make because people aren't used to thinking that way because we're so individualistic. But I think about my actions in terms of how to
Always individualistic.
If we have an educational system that thinks the same way, I
illusion.
don't think those problems would arise. I think there'd be an easy way to circumvent rare issues of that consideration. Does that make sense? I'm glad you brought that up, though, because I thought about that, and I was actually going to include that very point in the presentation based on what I said in a much more organized way than what I'm saying right now. Because it is a good point. It's a very good point.
All right. We have a question from the internet. Louise from Finland is asking, how does the system proposed deal with psychopaths and other mentally ill people or people who do not plan to play nice, so to speak?